Good evening, everyone. Good
Good
evening,
evening.
Mia.
Good evening,
Good evening.
and Happy New Year, everyone.
Good evening,
Happy New-
Alicia. Nice to see you.
Good evening.
Hi, Unella. How are you?
I'm great, Suki. How are you? Hi, Alicia. How are you?
Hi.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Mhm. Who's on the phone?
I've asked that they unmute, but they have not yet. As you all know, of course, the meetings are open to the public, so it can just be a constituent or interested person.
So, Mia, shall we wait a few minutes to start and then we can ask everyone to introduce themselves?
Sure thing, that's fine.
Hi, Nicola.
Okay, now I can. I couldn't unmute myself before. Okay. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Has done the most to make this fabulous.
So Esteban and John said they were both going to be here, so we'll wait a few more minutes for them. Hi, Teresa. Hi, John.
Hi, Suki. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you? Happy
Good.
New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Suki.
Esteban, hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool.
How was everybody's holiday?
Too short.
I love
Tell me about it.
Definitely too short.
it. Usually around now.
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt. The phone number is 718-930. There's a bit of static coming through on your line. Either you need to.
Hello?
Yes, hi. We can hear you.
Mute.
You should, yes, you should mute yourself. Thank you so much.
Okay, are we ready to start? All right, so why don't we start by introducing ourselves? This is the subcommittee meeting for the City of Yes Zoning Amendments Subcommittee of the Land Use Committee of Community Board 9. Our committee consists of members of the ULURP committee. If we could just start, if the committee members could start by introducing themselves, and then the guests can also introduce themselves. My name is Suki. I'm a Community Board 9 member. I'll be chairing this subcommittee. I live in Prospect Lefferts Gardens. I've lived there for about 12 years now. And I've been on the land use committee for the last 2 years. This is my 3rd year. Who wants to go next?
I can go.
Nicola Esteban? Okay.
Yep. Sure. Hey all, Esteban Jaron, community resident member of the Land Use Committee, which I've been on for 5 years now, I think. And also a member of the Connex Tenant Union and on the Board of Tenants PAC, so mostly doing tenant stuff. And I live at Franklin and Carroll, so a little bit north of most of y'all, but still within Community Board 9. So, Nicolette, you want to go?
Nicola? Yeah.
Yeah, this is Nicola Cox. I am a community resident member of the ULURP committee. I have been on the committee probably started around the same time as Esteban. What was like 2017, 16, something like that. I thought you were on it at that time too, but maybe I'm mistaken. I am president of the Sullivan Loveland Stoddard Neighborhood Association. So we are the block between Montgomery and Empire Boulevard. And so I've been, involved with our community, our block association, as well as the land use committee. Born and raised in New York, been in this community for most of my life.
Hey, John?
Sure. Thank you. John Craver. I'm a member of the ULURP committee as a community resident. I've been on the committee, I think this is my 3rd, maybe my 4th year. With the pandemic, everything's kind of unlocked. And I'm an architect by training and profession, and as well as a construction manager for mostly commercial construction. So I live on Midwood Street, just off of Nostrand, and we've been here 4 years. Been a resident of Brooklyn for 40 years now. So lots of been here a good long time.
Okay. Oh, and not to forget Mia Hilton, our assistant district manager.
Struggling with the mute button. Happy New Year, everyone, of course. My name is Mia Hilton. I'm the assistant district manager at CB9 and also a resident of the community.
Okay, guests, do you want to introduce yourselves? Alicia, you want to start?
I'm Alicia Boyd. I'm a community resident and an activist. I just wanted to put it on the record that I was appointed to this committee by the chairperson of the ULURP committee at the last ULURP meeting. And then the chair of the community board removed me in violation of the community board bylaws, which allow both the chairperson of the board as well as the chairperson of the committee to appoint committee members. So I just want that to be noted on the record.
Okay. Unella?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Yanela Roan Perry. I'm on CB9. I'm on the Housing Committee for CB9. I'm also the president of my co-op board, and I'm in the 43rd district. And we're on the other side near Kingsbrook Jewish. So I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to participate and to join your meeting this evening.
Of course. Okay, who else? Teresa.
Hi, I'm Teresa Westerdahl. Happy New Year, everyone. I live on Sullivan Place, street over from Empire near Ebbets Field. I'm a community board member on the Environmental Protection Committee, and I'm surrounded, and my neighbors are, by development, and we've had a lot of problems with illegal activities, questionable activities. So we're very, very keen on finding out what is happening with this and doing the best to protect people's lives and homes and futures in our community.
There is a young man that I've seen often at our meetings. I'm not sure what your name is. Andrew?
Yes, hi. Please let me know if this is like supposed to be a closed meeting. I'm not on
It
any
is not. It's a
formal
public
board.
meeting.
Wonderful. Sorry. I'm Andrew. I live in Prospect Lefferts as well. I'm not on a formal board, but I take great interest in ULURP. So you've seen me around. By training, I am also an architect and urban designer. So is there any other questions?
No, whatever you want to say about yourself is fine.
Thank you.
Who the person on the phone, would you like to introduce yourselves? (718)
They look like they're muted right now, so maybe.
Do we need to unmute her? Mia?
Yeah, I sent the request.
Am I
to
unmuted? Hello?
Okay,
Can you hear
hi,
me?
we can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. I'm Pam Gill, and I live in the Prospect Lefferts Garden area. I've been a resident for more than 25 years. My daughter-in-law told me about this meeting. That's why I'm here.
Okay, excellent. So we'll get started right away. Nancy Hoke. Nancy,
Sorry.
Nancy.
Yes, Suki just invited me to come. I ran into her on the street today, and I'm really pleased to come. So my name is Nancy Hook. I live on Maple Street, and I've lived here since 1987. And I'm a member of the Maple Street Community Garden. That's been a major thing I've been doing in the last couple of years in terms of community activities. And, you know, I'm really concerned about housing issues and have been my whole life. So I'm glad that you're holding this meeting and glad that people are starting to think about what Mayor Adams' plans are.
Okay, so the City of Yes zoning amendments was something that was proposed by the Department of City Planning. We first got some information about it in October. There were a couple of public information sessions. Those were recorded. The videos are online. I think most of the subcommittee members have seen them. I will ask Mia to send around a link to the video to all of the board members. If you haven't already, I think somebody might have. But basically it consists of three parts. There are zoning amendments that are aimed at allowing for 0 buildings to be greener, like to promote the zero carbon policy. There are zoning amendments that are aimed at making economic development easier, and there are zoning amendments related to housing. When we discussed this in the ULURP committee, I think that most of us felt that it made sense for us to focus on the housing amendments, because that's where the biggest zoning changes are happening. But maybe at the end of the meeting, when we talk about our recommendations, we can talk about whether we should ask other committees like environment and economic development to look at other parts of the City of Yes proposals. Just to get right into the housing proposal, Nicola had earlier sent out something from the 2015 zoning for quality and affordability amendments, and that's what this is based on. In the information session, they told us that basically the upzonings would be based on those that were passed into law under ZQA in 2015. Has everybody on the subcommittee had a chance to review that material? Yes, no. I'm just going to very quickly screen share, if I can, to show the schedule of okay, so this shows how the amount that can be built under the ZQA program increases based on what type of zoning district you're in. And what's very significant is that it applies to every single residential zoning district, essentially above R4, but the biggest changes really start at R5 and above. And this applies without any without the normal ULURP review process.
Suki, you might want to explain to people what FAR is, because I don't know if everyone here is familiar with some of the terms that you're now.
So basically, FAR indicates how much can be built on a particular lot, depending on the lot size. And the higher the number for FAR, the more that can be built. The same is also true of the zoning districts in general. The higher the number that's attached to the zoning district, the more that can be built. So they can be built bulkier, they can be built taller. And so what these zoning amendments would do is to allow every residential lot to build more as of right. That means without going through a review by the community board. So on the right here, where it's shaded, you can see how much it's going up. So you can see that for the R4 and R5 districts, the increases are quite significant. You can build about 50% more. In the R6 districts, it's about 30% more. In R7, it's about 25% more, some a little bit more. Our entire neighborhood outside of Lefferts Manor, and there's also a single family area in Crown Heights, is zoned R4, R5 and higher. Much of it is zoned R6. There are parts that are zoned R7 and also R8 on Washington Avenue. So basically everything would get increased. Most of us have already had some sort of demolition on their block. A house is getting demolished. Some of us, have seen people trying to build on top of other buildings. That's happened on a number of blocks. And it's creating health and safety problems. It's not how people expect the neighborhood to look. It's not how people want the neighborhood to look. So this is clearly going to have a big impact. Does anybody have any questions, comments about this aspect of the program?
This is Nicola. Just to a point of clarification, ZQA already exists, correct?
Yes, it
What they're
does.
looking at doing now is expanding the definition of the affordable units that a building can have that would qualify for a ZQA exemption. Right? So it was passed along with the mandatory inclusionary housing years ago.
So, yeah, it was passed in 2015. And we talked about this several times at our land use committee meetings over the last year or two. It was not really implemented by HPD until quite late, maybe 2018 or 2019. And then it was stopped. The implementation was stopped by a fair housing lawsuit in 2021. So it was not used very widely. It was used in about 3 developments in our community district, all of which people came to our board meetings to complain about, because basically they were not expecting to see buildings of this size on their blocks, and they didn't understand how they were happening. But this is how it's happening. They were happening as of right. If they had not been stopped by the fair housing lawsuit, it could have been much more widespread. And what this new legislation would do is essentially work around the fair housing lawsuit, but as Nicholas said, by expanding the types of people who would have access to the affordable housing. Any other questions, comments?
Suki, I had a meeting last week with 777 Rutland Road. That's where they have the church.
Yes.
Right. And so they're building 12 stories, but they met with some of the community members, or community residents rather, as well as our council person, they said, Darlene Mealy. And it appears as if, or the impression that I got from the meeting that I had with them, is that it's a done deal that they're gonna upzone, because they said that they do have a ULURP, that meeting with ULURP, but I think the impression that we left with, it's that it's, they're shoo-in. There's nothing else to be done. Everything looks, real possible, and everyone seems excited about the prospect.
Okay,
Now,
so go ahead. I am not aware of them having filed any ULURP applications, but we can definitely check on it after the meeting and get back to you.
The issue also is that these are on the block that they're building, these are 2-story homes, right? They're building, it's right next to the old boys school, boys playground. And also on just across the street, you have the Vital Brooklyn project for the state, which they're thinking now of building. Also, I understand they may go higher now because one of the buildings, they're going to house a supermarket underneath.
Right,
So,
that is what the fresh amendments allow them to do.
right. So in speaking with the leaders from the church and their group, they said that they did everything that they were supposed to do. I understand there was a deed restriction, but it seems as if they're saying that's not an issue anymore. And they're moving ahead with ULURP. as far as the air quality, as far as the parking, as far as everything's concerned, everybody was a bit concerned. But they did meet with, they said they met with the Jewish community first, and then they met with the rest of us. We did ask for a community advisory group to be put together so that we could at least be kept abreast and monitor what's going on to see as far as that's concerned. They're open to the idea, so I'm waiting to see. And in the same like mind, Vital Brooklyn project seemed to be moving along, but the community advisory group that started, I don't know. I've been trying to contact Miss Dillard, who was the one who, but nobody seemed to be interested, or I don't know if the group has dissolved so far. You know, so that's another issue that I had reached out to Dante to find out what's going on, because that also is, it's like around the whole area, everyone's inundated.
Okay, do you have any requests for anything you'd like us to do? We can definitely check on the ULURP filing, and we can check on the deed restriction. That should have been done with DCAS if it was done.
Right. Yes, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, is there anything else that you'd like us to do?
Well, I think that what I would like to do is to have the community, find the community members form, you know, some sort of watchdog group to oversee, and have your committee be abreast, kept abreast with what's going. Not that I'm involving you, but in as to get involved. But at
Okay,
least
so we will take that up at the regular ULURP meeting
Exactly.
next week. Okay, so Jay, did you have any comments about the zoning? Mia,
Yeah,
can you unmute Jay?
Sorry about that. I was going to comment on what Manella said, but I could wait until the
Yeah.
other meeting for that.
Does anyone have any comments directly about the zoning increases for the ZQA City of Yes?
I think Sugi is John Craver.
Yeah.
I guess for people who may not fully understand, or like including myself, just there are two columns. Obviously, the residential, the first column, and the middle column, inclusionary housing, FAR, and then the affordable independent residence for seniors. There are different values depending on the use of the building. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right.
So the far right column, the AIRS, is what we've been told would apply under City of Yes.
So that gets extended essentially everywhere.
To
for all
all affordable
Yeah.
housing, not just for seniors.
Okay.
Nancy?
I mean, I think I have the same question. Like before, you said something about there are certain people that, and Nicola was intimating there were certain people, or if they, is it that there's going to be more affordable housing in these buildings, or is it just an extension of who gets affordable housing? Is the affordable housing going to have a lower, you could have a lower income and still get the affordable housing? Like I don't quite understand what.
We don't know yet. The affordability levels have not been, nobody has said what they are. They've just said that it's going to be like ZQA, except that instead of the affordable housing being only for seniors, that it would be for everybody.
Okay, so ZQA was only for seniors.
Yes.
Okay.
And the mandatory inclusionary housing was for other categories of affordable housing. But they now want to extend it everywhere because basically the fair housing lawsuit stopped it because it was only for seniors.
Oh, I understand now. Okay, thanks.
But Suki, also they mentioned that the range for the apartments would salary would be from 34,000 to about 102.
And that's specifically for 777 Rutland Road, or?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that's not related to this, what we're talking
Right,
about.
yeah, I understand,
Not
yeah,
confuse everyone.
yeah.
But we will check up on that development and get back to you next week.
Mhm.
Okay, so the next thing that we've been asked to review is HPD's Where We Live plan. This was a study that was done under the last administration. They engaged.
Be-
Nicola, go ahead.
Before we jump to that, did we finish all of the proposed changes that were under City of Yes related to
okay.
housing?
So yeah, there are other changes proposed as well, not just these zoning increases. They've been fairly vague about it, but they're saying that they want to make zoning changes to allow for housing in office buildings that would apply primarily to commercial areas of Manhattan. We don't really have office buildings here. They're also intending to increase the dwelling unit factor, which would allow for more small apartments like studios and one bedrooms. Right now, I think there's a restriction, so it basically requires more of a mix, like 1 and 2 bedrooms, in addition to studios and in larger buildings. And I think they're also intending to make it easier to have like 2-family houses in again, it's not that clear, but they're saying like in R3 districts, which are usually a mix of 1 and 2 family houses, they want to make it easier to have that second unit. That's what I heard at the information session. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on anything else. John, look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I think there's something also about ADUs, accessory dwelling units, which could also, they will also encourage development of those. So if you had potentially a single family house and a larger yacht, you could have a accessory development or dwelling unit in the sort of rear yard area. So they would encourage that.
I don't know if they've been specific about like the lot sizes that were required.
Correct. Right. Again, as you said, they're keeping everything very vague and sounding nice without being specific.
Yeah. I mean, again, I feel like that is probably not aimed at us because most of our single family houses are on relatively small lots, like in the manor, we're basically 20 by 100 lots. Some of the detached houses are 30 by 100. 50 by 100 is pretty unusual. We definitely don't have any of those 100 by 100 lots like they do in Staten Island. So it's not, you know. Anybody else? Anybody else want to?
Well, they also had a reduction in unnecessary parking requirements to unlock additional housing.
Right, that's
and
another
so we
part.
know parking has always been an issue around here.
Yeah, that was also an aspect of ZQA, that any areas that were not in what was defined as the transit zone were going to have essentially waive the 50% parking requirement for affordable housing. And I don't know if people want to discuss that now or at another time, because I think CB9 is going to have a transportation town hall. But all of CB9 is in a transit zone. So that means anywhere in this district that there's affordable housing, there's not going to be parking. But there were districts that were there were neighborhoods that were just exempted from this. I'm not really sure why, except possibly that their elected officials asked for it. They have subways running through them. But that's something that people may want to ask about.
Before we delve further, can I just clarify, what are we trying to do with this subcommittee? Are we just discussing things? Are we trying to come up with action plans or points of
So I
concern that we
think
want to
we
follow up
should-
on?
I think we should go over what it is. The next thing we're gonna look at is the where we live plan. That has some pretty specific goals and recommendations. And in theory, the city of Yes is supposed to help implement the where we live plan. But it's not clear that it does that. It's also not clear whether it fits in with other long-term goals and projections that the city has made recently. So I think that we should be coming up, because it's still fairly vague, I think we should be coming up with a list of questions. I think if, we're all just sort of like flabbergasted by what's going on, and we all just, have a very strong opinion, we can come up with some recommendations. But let's see what people think.
Okay, before we jump to the other plan, I think that there are other zoning implications in City of Yes besides housing. Because remember, with the economic development, there were several zoning changes proposed, such as removing dance restrictions and the whole cabaret license issue. And part of the concern I have is that, again, we're a tight grid. We have commercial on our avenues and we have our, residential on the blocks. We have commercials on our corners. So to lift some of these licenses on blocks that have a restaurant on the corner could be a significant impact to that block and the neighborhood. So I wanted to possibly spend some time discussing some of those changes on the commercial, because we are a blended community. We have commercial as well as residential in our area.
Okay, do we want to vote now on whether we want to make recommendations on that, or pass it to the Economic Development Committee? Or do we want to wait until the end and see what
But
people...
it's zoning. Do they know anything about zoning? And I'm not sure what Economic Development Committee is. Are they dealing with zoning issues?
Well, they should. If we make that recommendation to them, they should. I mean,
do they know about the zoning laws?
The zoning changes are not, they're more nuanced, right? They're not really like
I don't think they have it.
But okay,
Lauren
on our committee.
They're adding right now it's conceptual. I know, at least they're not releasing to us the details, but I think we as a committee, we're talking about land use, we're talking about zoning in our area. We could discuss what some of these things what the implications may mean, reading between some of the lines. I mean, you look at it and say economic opportunity, not our problem. But then when you start talking about, okay, what does this really mean? It could impact. I mean, your block, you have restaurants on your corner, right? You've had sound issues with some of the restaurants that have been on the corner. What happens if they can now expand and have more dancing? What will that mean to the community and to our residential blocks? So it's just something that we may need to keep in mind.
Okay, so subcommittee members, do we want to spend some time looking at the commercial recommendations, or do we want to ask economic development to look at it first? Can I just see a show of hands whether we want to talk about this now?
I think it's kind of rude for you to just ask for one group of people's opinion when we're all sitting here. I think that's a little rude. And I also believe that there are other issues that are commercially important that you have not talked about. And this was not, from what I've been told, this was not supposed to be a situation where we just kind of vote or it gets voted. It was supposed to be a situation where we actually are supposed to understand what's going on with these proposals and know a little bit more detail on these proposals. And, you know, instead of just voting on whether or not you like the proposal, but really trying to figure out what the proposals are.
Okay, anybody else?
Secondly, I'm not finished, Suki. Secondly, there is the whole issue of taking the commercial overlays. And that is a very important issue that you have not mentioned, and increasing the FAR by 50% to encourage a destroy and rebuild model.
Oh, yeah.
That, to me, that's not economics, that's ULURP. And then the moment we start talking about getting some other committee to do work, and we're not doing the work ourselves, means it's not going to go anywhere, because the economic committee can, you know, say, well, that's not our problem. We don't know anything about zoning, and they don't. So it's a zoning issue. It has to have zoning changes, right? These commercial overlays have to be done through the zoning code. We are a zoning subcommittee. And so because these codes have to be done, it would make more sense for us, and I say us because even though I am not a member, I am attending, to talk about exactly what these changes are. And if we don't know, then possibly that could be homework for somebody to find out.
Okay, anybody else? Esteban?
Yeah, to address two things there. Just that since we're going on the record, I do want to make sure to note that when I made the motion to create the subcommittee, it was specifically with the understanding that there would be actual members from the community that were in the subcommittee. So that was the motion I made. Just want to put that out there. But I appreciate the committee members and the community residents that are here. Also, I think that just based on what I've seen over the past few years, I don't think that we can really rely on any of the other committees to do specifically the zoning work. I think there's just way too, the level of knowledge that you have to be able to even discuss this stuff is like really specialized, and like the people in this room know this stuff. And I think this is really the only opportunity that we're going to have more broadly as from Community Board 9. I just don't see any other committees really being able to like make the kind of recommendations that we could make. So I think it does make sense for us to cover as much of that, whether it's commercial, economic development, environmental, any of that. And then, if those committees want to like add to that, to whatever it is that we recommend, then that's great. That would be amazing. But I don't know that we're going to get like a really full picture of what this is going to do overall without just attacking that stuff ourselves and figuring it out. So.
Okay, anybody else? John, you're a commercial architect. You have anything to add?
I'm looking at Zola as I usually do when I'm on the ULURP committee meeting. And Alicia brings up an interesting point about the commercial overlays. If you look at where those overlays are, we all, if you stand on Nostrand or even Rogers, you can kind of envision where you think they are. They actually go 2 to 3 lots into each of the side streets. So I live in Midwood and Nostrand, and there's obviously commercial along Nostrand, and you think it ends at the back of the buildings that are fronting on Nostrand. It goes again, 2 to 3 lots further down, in Midwood, Rutland, and Maple, and all the streets up and down Nostrand on both sides. So there is the potential that that entire area could be redeveloped as if that all gets upzoned, it gets much more, all those properties get much more tasty for a developer to come in and do, as Alicia called it, a destroy and develop model, because they can go now, 150 feet, it looks like, deep, rather than this, what looks to be like a 75 to 100 foot. So
do we know that they would increase the commercial overlays by 50%? I must have missed that.
It's not increased. That's where it is currently. I mean, there are 3 houses east of me right now, and 2.5 of those are within the overlay.
So that's existing
right.
zoning.
Right, but if the overlay, the commercial overlay gets upzoned,
Do we know that that's going to be the case?
I thought you had mentioned that was a possibility.
That was one of the, if you paid attention to that pamphlet, that was definitely one of the models. And the idea was stated that it was to destroy and rebuild.
Mhm.
They used the small businessman
Yeah.
as an
to sell the-
example.
Okay, that's not exactly what I heard, but maybe that is a good point that we should be asking
Mhm.
for more specifics on the commercial part. What I heard was that they wanted to combine C1 and C2 zoning districts, which are similar, except that C2 allows certain uses that C1 does not. It's like a handful of things. I think they said like artist studios and bike shops, and
Right.
but otherwise they are fairly similar. They're both
Mhm.
considered to be local retail districts.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
there were others that were much more oriented towards manufacturing districts. I think they wanted to eliminate loading requirements.
Mhm.
Was there did anybody else notice anything specific that they mentioned?
Mhm. No, yes, and I guess for those first two examples, Suki, they did talk like if someone has an architectural or I'm sorry, an artistic like studio where they were potentially selling art supplies and they also wanted to have art lessons within their space, they wouldn't potentially be allowed to do that under current zoning. Same with the guy who owned the bike shop. If he sells and repairs bikes, but then he wanted to get into rentals, that's a different use, and they wouldn't be allowed to operate out of that current space. So they're selling these, as very seemingly sensible, and I would agree in those two cases that those are additional uses that could very well be very understandable to continue or to add to the acceptable use. But again, I think I'm always worried about what they sort of hide and what they're really trying to get by selling and painting the poor business person being, caught in the clamp of zoning restrictions.
Okay, so this should maybe be a question that we should ask for more specifics on.
Yeah.
Anybody else before we move on? Okay.
Is it possible to change the Zoom to have a chat function? It sounds like creating lots of different things. I'd be curious to see.
Oh, they don't want us to chat, babe. That's not how CB9.
No. I want to see like the PDF of whatever is pointing to, because
That makes sense. Why can't he see that? Community can't see the documents and what we're discussing.
But I'm also not trying to start any drama. I believe you on face
You're
value. I'm just
starting
trying
drama.
to
You're starting drama. I'm telling you right now. CB9 does not want us to chit chat with each other, nor do they want us to have access to the materials. And so there is no chat.
Noted. Thank you.
Okay, I will happily share the materials that I'm sharing with anyone. I'll send it to Mia afterwards, and if she has your information, she can send it to you. That's, the chat thing I don't have any control over.
Neither do I. Thank you, Suki. I will send it out to any interested parties. If you have not communicated previously with the board office, you can just send an email over to bk09-1@cb.nyc.gov, and I will gladly reply with the information that Suki is presenting this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm just going to continue with the housing portion. I'm going to do a new screen share. Okay, so this is from the HPDs where we live. And it's very long. My takeaway is that the concern is about fair housing. It's about helping low income and disadvantaged people to live in neighborhoods of opportunity, amenity rich neighborhoods, however that's defined. To specific things that they seem to be very concerned about are income and race. So this is a map that they put together. This is from their report that identifies low poverty census tracts by race and ethnicity. So these are presumably the kind of neighborhoods that they want to be more inclusive in terms of having more affordable housing. You can see that the blue neighborhoods are mostly white. The green neighborhoods are mostly Black. The yellow neighborhoods are mostly Hispanic, and the red neighborhoods are mostly Asian. So they really didn't say anything specific about which neighborhoods they considered to be neighborhoods of opportunity or amenity rich or whatever, other than saying that they supported the Soho and Gowanus rezonings. You know, you can see here, downtown Manhattan and the neighborhoods west of Prospect Park are among those low poverty, majority white neighborhoods. So perhaps that's what they're getting at. Does anybody else want to say anything about what they took away from this, Esteban?
Okay, yeah, sorry, my mute wasn't working. I just want to note that this came out before the Soho NoHo rezoning, and specifically HPD was responsible for basically lying to the City Planning Commission about what that rezoning was going to do and the rent stabilized apartments that it was going to put into jeopardy. Something like 89 buildings of primarily low income Asian American or immigrant families will be facing potential demolition of their buildings. And when you look at this in context, it really doesn't match their stated goals. So I would say that in reading this, it had a little bit of a what department put this out, because this is not the HPD that was obviously taking part in the Soho NoHo rezoning. I was at a hearing where I watched the commissioner completely misrepresent the rent laws that I helped pass and write. So like it's less than what would the word be? Let's just say I don't trust that their goals are exactly as stated. You'll also notice that like one of the things that gets done pretty commonly in these sorts of and especially in these maps is that they'll take a neighborhood, say like there's parts of Crown Heights that have recently gentrified and are still, there's still folks that are barely holding on, but the overall picture of that neighborhood is now of a higher income and of a wider neighborhood. And now they're going to use that as a neighborhood of opportunity, even though it's still there's still people hanging on trying to not get displaced. So this is happening actually in the very north of Crown Heights, where they're trying to rezone Atlantic Avenue. Like they're saying that this neighborhood is affluent and there's still rent stabilized tenants that are on those blocks that are not being counted anymore because now they're in the minority. So so I think it's important to take like a contextual sort of historical look at these things before you just lump them together, based on what the current census says, because we know the changes that have happened in the last 10 years. And that those are, it's still not a neighborhood of opportunity if you just recently displaced all the Black people in it. Like that's not a fair way to approach it. So those two things.
Definitely. Definitely. And this map is based on 2012 to 2016 data. And according to this map, this part of Brooklyn really would not be considered one of those neighborhoods of opportunity. And anybody else want to say anything? Okay, so one of the things that I did when I heard about this City of Yes rezoning was to map out what I thought the effects might be. And I based this on the upzonings from the ZQA schedule that we showed in the beginning, and certain basically we were able to do this all across the city using public data for lot sizes, existing building sizes, zoning, etc. And we exempted the landmarked districts. We exempted the single family districts. We exempted lots that had co-op and basically we wanted to look at whether this would cause demolitions of existing buildings. So we did exempt co-op and condo buildings because we just think it's unlikely that they would sell to developers. You know, if you've got, you know, possibly if you have like a 4 or 6 unit condo building, that might happen. But if you have a 40 unit co-op building, that is unlikely. We also exempted existing MIH districts, although one question is whether these upzonings would apply to areas that were already under MIH. We don't know. And there are some manufacturing districts and commercial districts that have a residential district equivalent. Some, so those were included, some do not. Public housing was included. There are a lot of low density public housing projects in Brooklyn. Rent stabilized buildings are included because demolition is one of the few remaining ways since 2019 that you can legally clear a rent stabilized building. So this is what we came up with. Everything that's red is a building that could potentially be demolished and redeveloped. Oh, and also basically we said that something was a candidate for demolition if what was allowed to be built under the new zoning was 2 times the current building size. That's something that actually Richard Barak told us at some point, is that that's kind of a rule of thumb for whether a developer would think about demolishing. So using this criteria, we mapped all across the city, and you can see that the effects are very extensive. It's not likely to happen right away, but could it happen over a generation or 2? Absolutely. And when we counted up the total number of units that could be built, it's about 900,000, which is an enormous number. Obviously, you can see our part of Brooklyn is very hard hit, but also many parts of Brooklyn, many parts of Queens, many parts of the Bronx. There's really almost no community district and no council district that is not affected, but some are certainly less affected than others. You know, these sort of white-ish areas essentially don't really are not going to be affected by this.
I'm sorry, where are we?
Yeah.
So
Suki,
we
we're
are
not-
this green spot right in the middle. That's the
I
park.
don't see that.
This
Yeah.
this green part in the middle. Can everybody see my arrow?
I
We're
see
still
your arrow.
showing the
Park.
HPD.
Right. The low
Um,
poverty.
So this is Prospect Park, and on this
Nope.
map, this is Prospect Park, right?
Your screen is
So-
still showing the low poverty HPD goal.
Right. And then
Oh,
the right
okay.
side it's gray.
Okay, all right, so this is, I guess I have to do a new share. This is tricky. All right, can you see my map now?
And
No,
who's the we? Who did this?
Okay, so this was done by me and my husband. Basically, we just used city data sources, the open data, the city's Pluto database for lot sizes, building sizes, etc. It really is, it does not take very long to do if you're going to do one district, you might as well do the entire city, basically. So this is us right here. Can you see my map now?
No, I see a circle on the old map.
Okay, so I guess I have to do a new share. Mia, can I do a new share?
Yeah, you can.
Here we go,
stop
here we go.
sharing.
Okay. Okay, can you see it now?
it
We can
says-
see the new map. Perhaps you need to zoom in a bit if possible.
Okay,
City.
all right, so here we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Is that better? Okay, so this is obviously us, just to the east of Prospect Park. Right, so you can see that our district is heavily affected, but we're not the only ones. A lot of Brooklyn is screwed. There are definitely portions of every borough that are affected. There are portions that are really not affected, you know, right here. These are landmark districts here. Some of these are landmarked districts. Landmark districts, these are not affected. Single family, this is Midwood. This is probably single family. Staten Island, largely not affected. Portions of Queens, Northwest Queens, very much affected. Portions of Central Queens, these are probably housing projects, actually.
Yep.
These big red squares, these are all housing projects.
So this is based on the current zoning and what the mayor
This is
keeps
based-
saying.
This is based on the city of Yes, what would happen under city of Yes.
Right, and what he keeps saying is that he wants to expand into some of these single family areas, like in Queens, so
Which is
that they
not
can
going to
have their
happen.
fair share of housing.
Which is
Correct?
not going to happen because city of Yes does not touch the single family districts.
That's not, well, what they want to do is they want to change the commercial overlays that would allow them to go into those places. And they showed you a sample of that, the 1-story commercial, and they want to put residential on top of it. Do the C1 to C6. You can't do it for C8 too. So that's not necessarily true.
So C1 through C6 already have residential district equivalents. They can already build. So I'm really not
They're
sure.
talking
what
about
the-
increasing the FAR on those so that you can get more development on top, more residential development on top.
Right,
those
so
ones
that
that are-
sounds like something that we need to ask for more specifics on. I don't think they didn't give anything specific.
But they haven't given anything specific, so I'm not sure what variable you're using to come up to make the
So
determination.
this is based on the ZQA zoning increases, that chart that I shared in the
Yeah,
beginning.
but you don't know what it applies to. You don't know what zoning they are applying.
Well, we do. That's what the chart says. The chart says that it applies to zonings from R4 all the way up through R9.
Yeah, but they didn't put that in. They didn't put that in writing, did they?
Well, I asked them during the public information session whether the upzonings were going to be the same as ZQA, because that's what they'd previously said. They said it's going to be like zoning for quality and affordability, but for all types of affordable housing. And they said yes. They said the upzonings are going to be the same as ZQA.
Okay. Go ahead and believe
We
it.
obviously, it's still, you know, as Nicola has said a number of times, it's still in a draft stage. So part of why we're talking about this obviously is we would like to have some influence on this.
Yes, but that again, that's only for the residential. That is not for the commercial.
Yes, that is for the residential portion.
And so you haven't done anything for the commercial.
Well, we have,
right.
because like, for example, all of those areas that have, all of the C districts that have a residential district equivalent, like C4, C6, et cetera, we assumed all of those to have their residential district equivalent, and we upzoned them accordingly. So yes, all of those are included. The only districts that are not included are those which do not have a residential district equivalent, as you pointed out, the C8.
Okay, so because again, this is ZQA, which currently exists. Only thing that my understanding of City of Yes was that they were going to expand the categories, affordable housing categories that could be used to apply for this zoning for quality and affordability. Are we saying that we would want to object to the expansion of the affordability categories, because ZQA already exists, so I'm not sure what we could do about the base program and the
Well, it already
parameters of the base
exists.
program.
It already
Uh-huh.
exists, but it's not being used because since July of 2021, it's been halted by a fair.
I understand that, but on the record as a law, it exists. It may not be used, but it's out there. So if they are now trying to make modifications to make it more palatable and attractive to developers, which is what I think they're trying to do, how do we stop that? Because now we're just dealing with affordability categories.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to understand what avenue would we be using to try and, put pressure on our elected officials, or I'm trying to understand the game plan. If we have concerns about this, what could we possibly do to stop it?
Because I don't.
Okay, so that takes us to process. Does anybody want to comment on the content of this before we get to?
Well, I don't believe that this is just a matter of expanding the categories, because if developers wanted to do the ZQA and the affordable category was for seniors, who do they care? As long as they get the added FAR for participating in it.
Well, they don't care.
If you don't mind, if I would like to finish, if you don't mind. I believe that they are also going to increase the FAR to make it more palatable for the developers, because otherwise it really has been a failure as far as they're concerned, not just because of the lawsuit, because there was no temporary restraining order. They could have continued to build, and people did continue to build under the ZQA. But they realized that developers were not biting for, so the fact that they're going to extend the affordable category to include more people is just for them to try to make sure that they adhere to that particular lawsuit. But that's not what they're going to do to get more developers to participate. What they're going to do to get more developers to participate is to increase the FAR, because that is the ticket for them. Developers don't care who they target. They're not that concerned about that. They're not concerned. They're concerned about how much FAR they're going to get. And so I think that should be the primary focus, is what are the developers planning on getting out of the ZQA? And I do not believe that the FAR is going to stay the same, because they have not participated in it currently in the form that it currently is.
Yeah, if that's the case, it would look even worse. The map would look even worse than it does now. Anybody else? Any questions, comments?
I have a question.
Sure. Who's?
Suki, this is Jay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you? I'm looking at my Zoom screen, and for some reason I can't see myself. Is that the changed format where everybody could just see everybody else?
I really don't know.
Okay, because I can't see where I am.
I can't see you at the moment.
Okay.
I can see you. I can see you. Did you scroll?
Yes, I can see you, Jay. Yes, Jay, I can see you.
I can see you. You might be. Are you using your phone or your computer?
I'm using a computer. That's okay. I'll just say my comments. I'll work out the details. Here's what I want to know. Are there any specific? Because I read the City of Yes, and then I also read Mayor de Blasio's other provision, which is, I guess, Where We Live NYC. But in terms of what we're doing now, are there any specific drafts, like text, that says, okay, here's the text of what we want to do? Because I didn't see any language. I didn't see any specific text of what is that out there. Did they give it to you guys? Did they give it to anybody, or are they just talking in like?
Okay, so we have two different things. We've got City of Yes, and we have the Where We Live NYC. Where We Live NYC is a long report. Again, I'll send the link to Mia, and you can take a look at it. City of Yes, all we have so far is a web page on City Planning's website, which is quite vague. And then we had 2 public information sessions that are recorded. They're on YouTube. Again, I will ask Mia to share the links.
Yeah, so I read, well, de Blasio's, that refers to like a different administration and what's in the past. So that's something that he said as far as like ideas go. I'm concerned, what are they looking to actually specifically pass? Okay, because
City of Yes.
because the
They
two
are
hundred.
looking to pass City of Yes.
Okay, now in City of Yes, just going to that, looking at City of Yes and just just so I understand this, where we live was by de Blasio back in like 2018. That's in the past. Those were some ideas. Now we have Eric Adams. Eric Adams comes with City of Yes, and he says specifically nothing. There's no specific, like ZQA had like hundreds of pages of specifics. I don't see any draft things. I just see some ideas that we're talking about. And what I think that, like, I would humbly say, the ULURP committee should say, okay, specifically, what specifically do you want to change? Put it specifically down. Like, because there were some general concepts like, if I remember correctly, like changing the amount of of one bedrooms, which is very significant. Like, because in the ZQA, there was a certain amount of studios, one bedrooms, two bedrooms. So Eric Adams comes in here, the mayor comes in with the City of Yes and says, you know something? We need more studios and one bedrooms, okay? So if you're a developer, that's going to be a whole lot more people in a building, okay? That affects the bulk. So one aspect that I saw is when I saw it said studios and one bedrooms, I said, this is going to overpopulate certain areas. Like CB9 is done because there's no parking requirement. So now you have a building, forget about the two bedrooms, forget about the three bedrooms that I want for families. It's going to be studios and one bedrooms, which is a gift for real estate developers. I also saw something in there, if I remember correctly, about changing the size of the minimum size of either the studios or the one bedrooms. That's very significant on changing the size, because if you have a smaller apartment, now you're going to put in so many more units in that, which is another gift for the developers, which is fine and everything. But the problem is that the cost on the community is you can have tremendous bulk and I think in terms of evaluating, we talk about displacement, this and that, the specifics of going to a one bedroom and not having to do a two bedroom, the specifics of changing the square footage means that you're totally going to change the bulk of the neighborhood. The prices will skyrocket for the buildings because it'll be that much more, on price per square foot will go up more, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But the problem is just in terms of the idea of displacement, in terms of a factor, I think maybe another factor should be this square footage change, this one bedroom change, because that could lead to even more of an incentive to build. And that's why there has to be specifics in terms of what are they looking to do. And I would just ask if the district manager or whoever it is, anything that comes to the committee or the subcommittee, everybody should post publicly on the website. Okay, public information for everybody, because even if we're having a presentation like this, whatever somebody knows, should be posted on it. Because right now I'm hearing everything about like City of Yes, and I don't see any specifics. And my fear is that they're going to come along. There's a whole bunch of like talk about, feel good stuff and everything, like an after school movie. And then they're going to say, okay, let's vote next week. There has to be at least like 30 days to see the specifics. And if they aren't giving it, somebody should say, we want it now. The second thing that you spoke about, what can we do? Can we fight it? Okay. I just wanted to just say to the committee, I think that there is a way to fighting a lot of this stuff. Okay. People talk about displacement and saying, okay, the prices are going to rise and, certain people are going to be displaced. I think that lack parking is going to cause displacement, because by an example, there's, I was talking with somebody at Harry Silver, not everybody has parking spots. Okay. So if people rely upon cars and now suddenly they don't have a place to park, it's going to cause displacement. And I think that in CB9, where they made a transit zone into all of CB9, I think it's a fair housing violation, because if it was supposed to be, if you take a look at the concept of expansive transit zones, CB9 is a huge transit zone. It's the whole district. So if you take like Clarkson Avenue, that's more than 0.5 from a subway. So if you want to know how to fight it, I'll give you two answers. Number one is the expanded transit zones don't happen in all neighborhoods. Okay, you take a look at who's in if you wanted to fight it, take a look at the expanded transit zones that are more than 0.5 of a mile from a subway. Okay, and then you take a look at it and you say, something, if it happens to be that it's in, let's say, neighborhoods of color, we have a disparate impact fair housing issue, where you have certain neighborhoods which are which are a transit zone, which you don't have to build parking. And the reason that it causes displacement is now you're going to have huge buildings, okay, and there's no parking. So fair housing on the transit zone is one thing. And the second thing is on the studio in the one bedroom, where they want to go to the studio in one bedroom. There's an issue in terms of not having housing for certain groups. Families are completely left out. If there's a family, you know, husband, wife, and 2 kids, 4-person family, I looked at the census, 22% of New York City is families, 4-person or more. 22% of 4-person or more, US Census, you can look it up, it's there. You suddenly say, I want studios and 1 bedrooms, okay? Now you're discriminating against family status, because if you're a family and you have kids, it's the studios and the 1 bedrooms, you're not gonna fit like 4 people in the 1 bedroom. So you can get them on the fair housing. If you wanted to do it, I would fight these guys hard. I would do fair housing stuff. I would bring in corporate counsel, a corporate New York City Corporation Council. They work for the community board. Tell them to do their homework, tell them to do the research and say, this is what we want. Go ahead and work for us. That's on the community board level. Okay, that's enough.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback on what you said, is that yes, they want to change the DUF and they want to definitely change the average size of apartments. The justification is that currently the larger apartments are now being housed by single people. You know, when you have a 3-bedroom apartment and you have 3 single people living in that apartment. By making the developments now cater to that particular population, as you noticed, they will be able to house single people in single small spaces. They also want to change the small spaces and reduce that size, because obviously a developer can get more out of their building, the smaller the average size. But I do think that a lot of these proposals will have to have city council approval. These are not just, these are text amendments. They have to go through the city council. And currently, Mayor Eric Adams, or so I've been told, is not really playing with the city council people. He just declared what some people say war on city council by trying to get 50% of the budget cut. So if he's not going to do, play with them nicely, there's a possibility that a lot of this will never get passed, because he needs the support of the city council people in order for it to do that. And I think part of our job should be is to hold our city council people under the fire, because I personally don't want to wait until these things are done. We want to try to nip them in the bud, so to speak, before they get done. And yes, you're right, Jay. It's not written anywhere. It's what they want to do. We look at the samples and we estimate how could that possibly happen. And then we guess that the only way that can happen is by them changing that. But they have not stated what that is. There's nothing in writing. Every time they come to the community, they have said, oh, we don't have the details.
I can't hear her anymore.
Alicia, you're frozen.
You're frozen.
Frozen.
Maybe she'll come back. But
We'll come
while
back
we're waiting
to
for
you.
Alicia, we could talk about the timing, because as Alicia said, in the hearings, they mentioned the fact that we're still very early in the process.
Right.
Alicia, you're back? Okay.
Oh, was I gone?
Froze. Yeah, you froze, so we didn't hear the rest of the end.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, my internet is so what I was saying was that it behooves us to look at the samples that they've given us and look based upon our information that we know about, zoning, and say, well, how can they possibly get that to happen? These are the zoning changes that they would have to do in order to make that happen. And this is what the effect can do. That to me seems the most plausible, as well as definitely demanding that what Jay said is demand that it get put in writing. And of course, really put some pressure on your city council person, because these changes have to go through the city council.
Anybody else? We have a couple community members who just joined us. Any questions, concerns? Fred?
But can we just talk about timing, since I know Jay was talking about having things in writing. My understanding from the hearings was that the first area that they were focusing on, and they said they would probably have, I think, some more details to share, would be related to the zoning for carbon neutrality. I think that's the first area that they were looking at implementing some changes. For housing, they spoke about 2 projects. They, or it might have been in another article I saw from Eric Adams, that they're focusing on a project in the Bronx related to the expansion of, I think, Metro North or subway line, and that they're going to be doing some rezoning there. And in Brooklyn, related to the CB8 Atlantic Avenue manufacturing zone changes. And that, I think, they were targeting for 2024 to start discussions around those zoning changes. So I don't think we're going to be seeing anything happening tomorrow or this spring. So we have some time to continue to put pressure on our elected officials, possibly, add our concerns. The main thing that they were talking about at the hearing was, let us know, give us your feedback, give us your concerns. So if we have any specific areas of concern, such as the lack of the fact that we don't want them to focus on just 1 and 2 bedrooms. What about the families that we have in our community? That may be something to do, to put together a list of concerns and action items and thoughts that we would want to share with City of Yes, as well as our elected officials.
Anybody else? Any other community members want to share any concerns? I see a couple of people have joined us. Andrew, Cheryl, Fred. 718-930. Teresa?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, have we really determined the difference between this blast proposal and City of Yes, and we haven't really discussed the environmental concerns, as well as it seems like what they're proposing is to totally take away the power of the ULURP committee as well as the city council for these, and it's just going to go through city planning, all the zoning and the changes. This is very dangerous.
Anybody else? Fred? Anything you want to add?
No, nothing to add. First of all, just apologies. I was trying to make it earlier. I just had some family stuff I had to take care of. But otherwise, I mean, listen, just from the piece I caught, it's like, you guys are really latching onto the issues that are really relevant with respect to this. So definitely looking forward. I think to the point where, it's not a tomorrow deadline where we have to have things, but we definitely can't rest and say it's not going to happen. Some portions of the City of Yes, from what I understand, are going to be subject to ULURP, particularly some of the text amendments. So that'll be a process as well. There'll be some time with that, but again, it won't be a lot. So whatever questions or whatever actions or whatever recommendations would probably want to come sooner rather than later in terms of a framework, just so that we can start making actioning that. You can bring it up to the ULURP, bring it up to the board, and we can kind of game plan in terms of what the outreach, what the strategy is going to be, who do we need to contact, and how do we address.
Okay. So I just wanted to say I agree that the city council would be the place to address a lot of our concerns. They did say that the text amendments were going to go through ULURP at the information session. And with respect to fair housing concerns, it's a little bit difficult for me to show a split screen. But if you compare the map that we put together of where we would see the most development under City of Yes versus the HPD where we live, where they've identified low poverty, majority white neighborhoods, it's exactly the opposite. What City of Yes really doesn't touch some of those neighborhoods because they're largely landmarked or single family, areas like this, like this, like this. like this, you know, good portions of Queens. And what it does do is largely redevelop areas like central Brooklyn, which do not fall into those neighborhoods of opportunity categories. So I think that's really a fair housing concern as well. Just also as a neighborhood resident, I'm really disturbed to see how much of the city, how much of our borough, but really every borough would be demolished or redeveloped. Anybody else want to say anything before we move on? Okay. So the next thing I wanted to bring up, which I think is really very important too, I sent this material out to our subcommittee members, but we have some updated reports out from city planning based on the latest census numbers. They have changed since the 2020 census. The new estimate for New York City's population is not 8.8 million. It's 8.47 million, just under 8.5 million. And that comes from the Census Bureau. A lot of people left the city during the pandemic. And if we also look at the 2021 HPD Housing and Vacancy Survey, that gives us the total number of housing units in each borough, gives us the the breakdown of different types of units, the size units. I think currently about 34% of the units in the city are 2 bedrooms, about another third is 1 bedrooms, and a fairly small percentage is studios, I think about 10%. And the city has a report that the Plan YC from 2010 to 2040, which has been updated, and it shows some housing projections of what we would need to accommodate possible increased population numbers out to 2040. And so if you look at those numbers and then you look at the numbers of housing units that we already have as of 2021, the number that would need to be built even to meet the city's projections, which we know are always a little bit high, is not that great. For Brooklyn, it's about 25,000 units across the borough, which is 18 community districts. So that was something that's very interesting to me. Whereas when you look at City of Yes and how many units it would create citywide, it's about 900,000 units. And that's versus what the city's own projections for how much housing we would need. They're really saying that Brooklyn would need to build about 25,000 units. The Bronx would need to build about 35,000, and Manhattan, Queens, nothing. Staten Island, maybe 5,000. So we're talking about well under 100,000 units based on city planning's projections of needed housing, versus this is what these zoning amendments would actually do. And that gap was very surprising to me. So I wonder if anybody else has had a chance to take a look at this and what you think. Anybody?
I took a brief look. I'm not surprised because the development targets are about making money and not about filling a housing shortage need, because the type of housing that's being developed do not meet the needs of the homeless and other communities that are desperate for housing. So I'm not surprised.
And what you don't see in any of these amendments is actually a targeting of of housing that would target. I mean, they talk about the fact that they need to build, we need to build our way out of the housing crisis and get the homeless off the street. However, there's nothing in these text amendments, nothing that will then actually focus the projected development to that population. I mean, we clearly have seen statistical analysis that show that the MIH is a complete failure, and that, you know, all the projected affordable housing has just created more housing that's for luxury development. And so if you're not really addressing, and none of the proposals, either these proposals or the Get Stuff Built, which is 111 proposals, none of these proposals actually would impact the target population that would be needed in order to address the housing crisis amongst the low and moderate income residents in this city. All it will do is exacerbate and create development. That's it, without a target. And so I believe that before we even talk about developing more of what we already currently have, and it's not, everybody sees that people are leaving. I mean, they try to make us believe that everybody wants to come into the city, but traffic is down 50% in Manhattan, as far as some of the recent studies. And so the idea of, oh, we need to build, baby build to get us out. Additionally, a lot of these amendments are supposed to save developers money, with the understanding that there's a trickle down effect, that, you know, if we can eliminate the need for parking spaces, for example, which are expensive for developers, then somehow that's going to get trickled down to housing that's more affordable. However, that trickle down effect, again, is not a reality. Developers just make more money. Their costs are down and they pocket the money. There's no incentive, again, within the text amendments to force them to create housing by these benefits to address the target population that is truly the most needy.
Unella, and then Fred.
Yes, I just wanted to find out if perchance anyone have an approximate figure of the vacant apartments. There are several buildings that have humongous stories and they're all empty.
Well, the vacancy rate in Williamsburg is about 30%. The vacancy rate in downtown Brooklyn is about 50.
And there's over 20,000 units vacant that are for
Yeah, so we've actually seen several stories out in the news media that there are 65,000 vacant rent stabilized apartments right now, which is a major concern, not just because it's housing that people need, but also because under state law, rent stabilization goes away if the vacancy rate is higher than 5%. And that is definitely higher than 5%. And the survey is going to be done in next year, in 2023. So if we don't fill up these apartments by then, we are in deep, deep trouble. About 2/3 of our housing units are rent stabilized. It's going to cause major disruption in our district if that happens. Fred?
Yeah, just reflecting on some of the points, I think I agree with many of the points that Ms. Boyd just discussed. The vacancy rate obviously is another question as well. I do question in terms of why the stock of rent stabilized apartments is so high. The cynic in me is like, that's artificial, because if you disqualify as many people, if you get more of those in the market, then all of a sudden now you have a chance to say, oh, well, it didn't work. Guess what? Now you can get rid of the program because nobody needed it. But, you know, I think there maybe needs to be some accountability in terms of, well, what's behind those numbers? Why is it so high? Especially when you have half of New York scrambling to try and get something that's affordable. And then all of a sudden you have these apartments that would probably make that happen, all of a sudden just on the side, not being utilized or not, you know. So I think that's something, one of the questions that we have to ask. And again, going to the point, I think, if they're talking about there's a target of 100,000 units that needs to be built. This is something I think we've discussed a number of times at the board and in different committees. 100,000, they're not differentiating between 100,000 market or 100,000 affordable, because you can build 100,000 market. I mean, and what they're trying to do is pave the way for that. But out of that, just even utilizing any of the stuff like MIH or ZQA, that's only 20,000 units net, because that's all they're required to do. Maybe give or take a couple of things after that, once you get that 20% after that. So it's really building again for who? Because if you're gonna put 80,000 on the market, that doesn't do anything. That doesn't dent anything. There's 80,000 more units that nobody can afford.
The other thing I want to say is that's a number that I looked at that is citywide, that their projections, and it's actually much less than 100,000. It's more like they're projecting a need for 55,000 more units citywide. And that is not tomorrow or next 10 years. That's over the next 20 years. So that's something that I think people often forget when they talk about targets. They want to see it happen tomorrow. But actually, zoning throughout the city allows for a lot of units to be built. It just doesn't necessarily happen tomorrow if there's, not the demand for it, or the conditions are not right, or whatever. And I, as Alicia said, the population that needs the housing now is the homeless, and we do have a legal requirement to provide shelter for the homeless, whether that's homeless shelters or permanent affordable housing. Esteban.
Yeah, a couple of things. To address Fred's question, there is actually a really specific reason why a lot of these units are being held. The rent stabilized units specifically, there's 3 different court cases that are now going to be lumped together that are going to go to the Supreme Court that essentially put rent stabilization as a whole on their docket. And we know based on previous decisions that that may not look good for rent stabilization. So we're in the middle of that, and landlords, in anticipation of that, and specifically in anticipation of some of the 2019 rent laws being struck down by the Supreme Court, they are holding those apartments because they don't want to have what they consider permanent tenants move into those apartments and then not be able to do anything about them. So that's really what we've been seeing over the course of the past 2 years. And now it's kind of just like, they say that it's because the rent laws don't allow them to get compensated for repairs, and that these apartments have been in ill repair for 30 years, without really telling you that they're the ones that have kept them in ill repair for 30 years. So that's at least a theory right now as to why that's happening at that scale. And then the other thing is, I think it's important to note that the city, in particular, the Department of City Planning, but also the Adams administration as a whole, has been lobbied and has basically adopted the overall mentality of the YIMBY movement, in particular through Open New York, which is a quote unquote grassroots organization, but it's actually like a real estate front. Their whole thing is that by building market rate, they call it filtering, or like what Alicia said, a trickle down. Their idea is that if you build more market rate housing, then the people that would normally be competing for apartments like mine would then go to the market rate housing, and then that would leave for the low income people those basically not as nice apartments. That's never been shown to work, but that's really the mentality that they're basing this on. So to them, they're not going to say it outright, but they don't have to make those apartments affordable, because to them, in their minds, if we build a certain number of market rate apartments, then that's all going to filter down, and then the poor people are going to be able to get something or other. Problem is that we've got so many vacant, brand new apartments in downtown Brooklyn, in Lower Manhattan. Like, those apartments are sitting empty already. Nobody's buying them, nobody's renting them. So it's not an issue of just getting more market rate apartments. That clearly doesn't work. But for some reason, they've decided to make this like the center point of their policy, and it's really what they're basing it on. Unfortunately, they don't really like say it out loud. They don't really talk about that as their policy, but the infiltration of the YIMBY mentality into that, and YIMBY, by the way, means yes in my backyard, as opposed to no in my backyard, which is what they would consider anybody who wants to, preserve, the either the character, the makeup, or the neighborhoods that we've got right now, basically. They would consider that a NIMBY, and that's kind of a derogatory term. I consider YIMBY a derogatory term because I hate them. So, but it's important to keep in mind that that's really their like driving principle right now. So when we go there and say, well, you need to build more affordable housing that's actually affordable to residents of the neighborhood, it just goes in one ear out the other. They really believe this other sort of premise, and I don't think that's something that we actually will be able to change. So we just have to keep that in mind as we're going through.
In his press conference, the mayor specifically said he doesn't have any affordability targets. His target is overall housing number. So he's not even trying to come up with a target. I think they're looking at de Blasio, because de Blasio had a lot of development, but he didn't make his affordable unit target. So I think that's part of it. Is like, well, we'll just target the total number of units that we'll develop, and not promise us a certain number of affordable units.
In anticipation of this trickle down effect.
Anybody else? Andrew, John, do our architects want to chime in? Okay.
I'm good. I think, yeah, there's just a lot of unknown. We are in the very early stages of this whole concept. I think it's great that we're getting involved in these early days, and we just need to stay involved and pressure our council people and I think hopefully make positive changes rather than, I mean, what we have right now is not working. So I think there are things that need to happen and need to change, but we don't want to have Third Avenue on Nostrand or Rogers or Flatbush, a Third Avenue Manhattan with 40-story towers.
Anybody else? I thought I saw a hand. Fred and then Jay.
Jay can go first. I
Okay.
spoke already, so Jay can go now.
So I just wanted to just, part of the city of Yes was going on the affordable units more towards studio and 1 bedrooms. That was what the general concept was. I wanted to just address the argument that 3-bedroom affordable apartments, that if you build just studio and 1 bedrooms, it's going to take people out of the 3-bedroom. So I wanted to present the idea that the city is not a bubble. So if you have a 3-bedroom apartment, and if people are living there, let's say you have 3 singles who are living there illegally in an affordable housing, because we're talking about just the affordable housing, we're not talking about the market rate, because Eric Adams' proposal was it went to the amount of studios, 1 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms, and he's saying, I want more studios and 1 bedrooms. It goes to the incentive on the ZQA. So if you take a 3-bedroom, and let's say you're just building studios and 1 bedrooms, if the problem in the 3-bedroom is you think that the singles, let's say, who are occupying the 3-bedroom go into those studio and 1 bedroom, you're still going to have other people from the Midwest, for example, who are going to come in, singles, and say, okay, I'm going to take that 3-bedroom apartment if they can under affordable housing. So the city's argument that says, okay, listen, we're building studios and 1 bedrooms, and now all these 3 bedrooms are going to be free and open for all the families, okay? If it's being done illegally, where 1 person can come in, put an ad on Craigslist, and then bring in 2 other people from who knows where, in the United States, and get 2 roommates, it's still going to be singles, because there's going to be people from all over that's going to come in. That goes to the affordable housing argument. The market argument I'm not going to bring up. It's something different, but if you build more studios and 1 bedrooms, I don't think it's going to free up the 3 bedrooms, because still at, let's say, if something went for 3,500, okay, for a 3-bedroom, and now you're building studios and 1 bedrooms, and now the singles go someplace else. If you put that, if it goes down in price to 3,400, you're still going to have singles that are going to come in for the market rate. So my point is that on the saying that we don't need 3 bedrooms, which is part of the zoning thing, to me, it doesn't make sense because there's going to be more people who are going to do it illegally and come in and do the same thing where singles are going to be renting out the 3-bedroom. My question, which I asked to people is it possible to rent a 3-bedroom if you're not a family? Like, can you get away with it with New York City affordable housing? You may be able to do it on the market rate by coming in, but will New York City affordable housing say, hey, listen, this has to be a family unit? If it does, okay, then, so that's one of the things. If there is a problem with singles occupying 3 bedrooms, it basically says they're renting illegally. So this, and, just I wanted to advocate the argument of the 3-bedroom. The other thing I wanted to say, Suki, is there I heard that there's going to be a very big meeting on January 10th at the land use meeting. I think whatever this Tuesday or whatever the 10th is. Did you guys hear about the Kingsborough West presentation from New York State? Did anybody hear about that?
He came to the general meeting to talk about the EIS, the DEIS being released.
Oh, it was at the general meeting? Like,
He
did
was
give a
at the guy from Fred, you remember this, right? The guy from Empire State Development came to our general. And
He did, I believe there was the document. Yeah, I believe you are correct in terms of it was the EIS that was being published.
Yeah,
I would have to check with the chair of the district office. I do believe I'd have to double check.
Is there going to be a
they'll
public
be addressing
hearing?
the board. They'll be addressing the board. I think the intent was to address the board. I'm not sure if it's through ULURP or housing, or possibly at the general board meeting, depending on what we're able to schedule for the month.
Okay, let me tell you what's important. The Kingsborough West, okay, this project, I've been in touch with, I've been emailing with Doug McPherson, who's like, I think a head at New York State, Empire State Development. And one of the emails, and people could make mistakes, so I'm saying in public, could be a mistake. But he said to me when I asked questions, he said, in the email, he said, you could ask those questions. I'll answer your questions at the ULURP meeting on January 10th, because that's when I'm doing my presentation. Now,
Not on our agenda, Jay.
okay, then maybe it was a mistake. But if you find out about it, because he was very specific, and there is a land use meeting on the same day that he sent me an email. So if you guys can check that out, because another thing is I noticed that the agendas aren't posted, and I would ask you, please post the agendas at least as ASAP, because it's a very important issue. But if the draft EIS statement is out there, it's on the website, that's a small fact. A presentation is much more, because that's where the community is going to come out and give their comments and everything else on the draft EIS.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Sora. The agenda for the ULURP meeting on Tuesday is on the website, should you want to review it.
Is there a presentation from Kingsborough?
No, it is not.
Okay, it was probably misinformation that was given to me by him. I retract that. Thank you. But it's an email. He sent me an email in writing.
Okay, anybody else?
Suki, I just had one quick point I wanted to make. So with respect to, I know that we were saying part of the strategy should be the pressuring of the city council. I want us to be also very cognizant in terms of, as you're continuing your work, the data is going to really rule the day, and it's going to be very important to put out past policy failure in terms of, if we're continuing what it is in terms of saying build baby build, guess what? Build baby build hasn't worked, because every time you put up stuff, it's all unaffordable. So the data is going to be very critical on that. And I say that to say, in terms of, I've spoken unofficially with different, council members, and this is not to say that even if it's ours or, but there are definitely people who are listening very intently in terms of what the mayor's plan is. So what is going to win the day, or make, be something that puts people or makes people accountable, is the, definitely pointing out what the policy failures are and the actual numbers, in terms of making sure if the numbers jive or they don't jive, that we're pointing those out specifically. The outcome I would like for us to have is, at the end of the process, there is a resolution of the facts in terms of what is approved, what we have found through, your research, what we can prove, what's demonstrable, what has been, done. and then really what the solutions are in terms of that. So in terms of
Yeah.
City of Yes, if something works, great. I don't never have a problem saying that's a good idea. But also I think it's good if we're able to come up with recommendations as well, in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah.
what will actually work in terms of this district.
Yeah,
or in terms of the state.
I completely agree. I'm really concerned that while we're looking the other way, thinking about, trying to force new affordable construction, that we're losing the existing rent stabilized units. I know that there were 3 buildings on my block that are supposed to be stabilized that for some reason are not registered with the state. And that's all over our district. I think there's like 200 some buildings that by age and number of units should be registered, and they're not. And what are they doing with raising the rents? Who knows? I don't know.
Doubling and tripling is what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's the point. They don't want to be known because this gives them the opportunity to do what, whatever do they want on the side.
And they
And
don't
then
have to actually, because the system doesn't require that they do any of that. Like by law, they technically have to, but the only way that the state and the DHCR actually investigates that is if a tenant that currently lives there decides to file a complaint, then they will look at it. But they don't have, like, they can see which buildings are not registered, but they don't do anything about that. They're completely the opposite of proactive. So DHCR is not to be trusted in terms of like the numbers that they put out, the numbers that the city puts out as well. There's not really like a solid accounting of all of the rent stabilized units even in. So like, yeah, I mean, the landlords can do pretty much whatever they want, because unless a tenant decides to step up and actually say something, then nothing's going to happen. And the problem there too is that a lot of these have been illegally deregulated. So these tenants are technically right now market rate tenants, even though they are by law rent stabilized. So they believe that they're not rent stabilized, which means that a landlord can just not renew their lease if they think that somebody's a problem, or that they're going to raise a fuss about something. So they have every incentive not to do that, so that they don't get kicked out of their apartment. So it's a really bad situation. Not one that well, we're working on some laws to actually mandate a better response system for just basic registration, but the state doesn't seem to really care too much about it.
Suki, can I just ask, did we have any information on Tivoli?
I believe that Pat said that she was going to file something with the board office. And Felice said that she knew somebody who was at Tivoli, who was going to come and speak to us at the next meeting. So I guess we'll see on January 10th, if there's someone who can come to give us information.
Yeah, because I mean, that's really, a shame if, that development, lose out, because they have been under supervision under the state for a long time as affordable, and for them now not to have that, it's a real shame.
Yeah, and the other issue is I know there were people were saying that there were major maintenance problems at Tivoli, that people had to be evacuated, and we're also seeing like fires in a lot of these rent stabilized buildings where people then have to leave because of vacate orders. There was a big one at 80 Clarkson, which is actually just outside our board, but it's in my neighborhood. Then there was another one around the corner from me on Flatbush, and it was the second one in that area in a year. There had been another one just last year. I think somebody said there was a fire at 33 Lincoln, which is actually one of the new buildings that has an affordable component. So we're going to lose units like this as well. So that's something. Fire safety is also something and building maintenance, something to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's almost 9 o'clock. I don't know how much longer you guys want to stay. If people are up for staying for another 15 minutes, we can talk about the blast report that Nicola sent around. I don't know if you guys are ready to talk about this, if you want to have a chance to read it and talk about it next time. What do people want to do?
I'm already half an hour late to attend an association meeting. So I
Yeah,
have to run.
So then we
let's
need,
do it next week. There wasn't that much, it's a lot of, they're in the weeds without providing a lot of insight.
what I would ask you to do, Nicola, and thank you, by the way, for sending that report around. That was great. What I would ask you to do, if you could, is identify those measures that they said have to go through ULURP. And then they said there were 4, and then there were another 11 that have to go through a city agency public review process. And if you can highlight those and send those out to the district office, so that people know that they have the right to public input, that would be fantastic. And then those that are ULURP, we will take a look at. So I guess before we close, can we come up with a list of further questions and concerns that we want to raise at our meeting next week, so that we can vote on it and send a letter to the relevant agencies?
Again, how are you voting on something that you don't know? You haven't, all you've done at this meeting for 2 hours is have a conversation about not much, but what are you voting on?
So we're putting together a list of further questions. A lot of people have said that they have questions, that they want to see specifics. What's already, people have concerns about what's already been.
You need a letter to tell them that you want specifics.
People have said that they already have concerns. So let's make a list of those so that we can.
So I guess you'll be making that list then. I guess you'll be making that list.
Okay, so does somebody want to write this down and be the secretary? Esteban, Nicola?
I suck at writing things down. Fair wording.
Okay, so we're being recorded, so we'll just do this verbally, and then I'll write it down later and submit it to the ULURP committee. So it sounds like the first question that people have that's been raised is with respect to the commercial aspects of City of Yes. We want to know more specifics about what zoning changes they're recommending. As I mentioned, the one specific, or rather 2 that I took away, where they were going to collapse C1 and C2 zoning, and they were going to remove the some of the loading requirements in manufacturing zones. So that's, but are there any others? Like, for example, is there going to be any upzoning for commercial overlays? That would be one question. Sounds like a second question is with respect to the dwelling unit factor increases. What exactly are you recommending? How much is that going to be increased, right? Jay, that's your question. So like
decrease.
Yes, how much would that be decreased? Because that increases the number of units that you can have. So for each zoning category, for each building size, how much would those dwelling unit factors be decreased? Does that sound fair, Jay?
Yeah, I would just mention whoever, I would, if there's a letter that's being sent out, I would ask them for whatever concept that they have. Do they have specifics for these concepts? I would do, to be honest with you, I would do a FOIL request to Department of City Planning, and I'd say, I want to see everything that you have that you wrote. I do a FOIL request on the Department of City Planning. I would do a FOIL request relating to this topic from to Eric Adams, okay? And I would say, I want to see everything. And then when they don't give you stuff, when it's redacted, then you could say, okay, that's how you came up with it. My biggest concern is that they're playing some sort of game where they're saying, okay, yeah, we met with the community, we had all of this citizen participation and everything like that. The community was informed. Now let's vote next month. You know, so I mean, like Suki, but you know, what you're doing is absolutely correct. I mean, in saying let's get the specifics of it. But I'm just so suspicious that they're just giving out all of these pie in the sky stuff, you know, and I'm really afraid that they're saying, okay, we talked about this with you for 10 months. We already talked about it.
Mhm.
I would say, listen, we have no loyalty to any politician. Nobody's on the board for political benefits. Do a FOIL request and let's say I want to see everything on the City of Yes thing that you have talked to. And I go to city planning. Okay, I'd go to Eric Adams, and I bet you there's going to be redacted stuff. And then when you look at the redacted stuff, you can say, oh, that's where you came up with this stuff.
Okay,
These guys are too smart to just
so
come up with.
let's do a quick straw poll. How many people are in favor of doing a FOIL request to city? I'm happy to do a FOIL request. I want to know what other people think. One,
I vote
two.
yes.
Okay, does anybody vote no? Any no's on doing a FOIL request to city planning? Okay, so we'll make that part of our recommendation to the ULURP committee. Happy to do that. You know, I can work with you on the wording of that letter. Jay,
Just FOIL request for
Right.
everything that relates to
Right.
the City of Yes, to the Department of City Planning, and I would also do it to Eric Adams because this is
Just
his.
so you guys know, though, FOIL requests take time. It's typically a minimum of 30 days, and if they don't get back to you within that time period, you're going to have to go after them. And the community board, as a board, can, you know, we have limited ability to engage in lawsuits if they don't answer us. So just so
Right.
you guys know.
You're
you
absolutely
know.
right. And if I could just add, Suki, then the board could have a resolution and say, you know something, city planning is not cooperating. It's been 60 days. They're not giving us any information, and it's their job to do it. And they could take a stance and they could say, listen, we want this stuff from Eric Adams. And if he doesn't give it, then the community board could be more aggressive and say, we want it by 60 days. We want it by 30 days. They're not representing us. I mean, like I've waited from New York State, Empire State Development for over a year for the Kingsborough West. Okay. So if they play games, the community board should be much tougher in going against these people. And politics should not be part of individual people's decisions on the community board, not to be tough with these representatives.
So the third specific thing I think that we should ask about is
Don't worry, Jay, they'll be fighting this one at they'll be deciding that they can't do a FOIL by next week. They'll come up with a rationale. So you just wait for that.
Thank you, Lisa. But Suki, your specifics are right. You know, in terms of asking what's the square footage that you're referring to. If you want more studios and one bedrooms, what's the percentage on affordable housing as far as the zoning code that you want it broken down to? Because there's a certain amount of, let's say, studios, one bedrooms and two bedrooms. If Eric Adams wants to change it to studios and one bedrooms, what's the new percentages? You know?
Yeah, so the mechanism by which this would be done is the dwelling unit factor. In terms of affordable housing, I think the percentages are dictated by which program you're using. Like HPD has certain programs, you know, state, federal government have other
No,
programs.
actually, the dwelling unit factor is by the zoning resolution, and it is only by the zone. It is not subject
Well,
to.
that's what I said, but when
not
you're talking
subject to the modification of affordable housing.
okay, so that is one factor. The next factor is what the affordable housing program you're using determines in terms of the mix. I mean,
They cannot violate the zoning resolution on affordable housing. There is no such thing as that, Suki. Trust me, I have delved in this very deeply in my lawsuit. The zoning resolution dwelling unit factor is determined by your
Okay,
zone.
but in any case, for this purpose, we're dealing with the dwelling unit factor because that's what's in the zoning code.
Right, and that's what you have to deal with. It's the zoning resolution. Not the zoning code, but the zoning resolution. And that's what determines your dwelling unit factor. They want to change that. That's all. They want to change.
So the third thing that I think that we should look at is how the city of Yes would impact development and how that fits in with the goals of the Where We Live report. Is this equitable development? You know, who is it impacting? And in particular, I think we want to highlight the impact on our own district. You know, I think that one of the things that people have repeatedly come to us about is the demolitions that are happening on their block that they don't want, that they don't expect, the buildings that are larger than what they expected. And, you know, I think that's an area of concern that this would continue those problems, it would accelerate them. And how does it fit in with goals of equitable development, which they say that they're trying to do? I think, you know, also how would it affect displacement? You know, that's something that we've all talked about before. Anything else specific? Anybody? Anybody? Teresa? John? Okay. So that's what.
Did we, I'm just looking through my notes. Did we have any questions or want additional information on the expanded transit zones? Or is that an area of additional analysis on our part? The impact of us being, our whole community being an expanded transit zone versus other areas of of Brooklyn in the city that may have similar characteristics, but not be deemed a transit zone.
Is that a recent change?
No, that dates back to ZQA. And I mean, I would say, Nicola, that from what I remember back in 2015, city planning initially said anyone who's within 10 minutes of a subway station or like 5 minutes of a bus stop is in a transit zone. But then specific neighborhoods obviously asked for and got exemptions. That's what it boils down to. So I guess what it boils down to is, do you guys want to ask to be exempted?
I think it's based on the mean travel time to the Manhattan CBD. That's what they're using as a determinant.
How do we know that?
Because that's what's in the, if you look at the map, like Manhattan Central Business District is whited out and its adjacencies to that. Also, city planning, there's a City of Yes, like how does this impact the streetscape and curbscape thing last week, and this was one of the things that they talked about.
That's on their website?
It was there's a YouTube video. I'm happy to share it. I don't know how to do it, but
okay.
Actually, something else that I'd be curious about. We've talked a lot about building and building size, the kind of extra building components that are affected by zoning. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever had to deal with like OSR, open space ratios, or like bulkhead variances, things that are usually done at higher, denser areas of the city.
Yeah, some of the bulkheads on the new buildings are extremely large. They're like probably 10, 15 feet tall.
Yeah. So is there an opportunity then to say like, hey, even though the community board might not have the same powers of ULURP that it does before, we've identified these things that are, you know, kind of footholds of where you can still maintain and press against development.
But that's not true that we don't have the same powers of ULURP as we do before, right? I mean, this is why we're talking about this now. This is our ULURP power if this is going through ULURP.
Yes, and I will note that we did not talk about the Citizens Budget Commission report, like, we didn't talk about that today, which has been talked about previously.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm gonna shush about that. But the other things that I meant to talk about were things that are outside of the building envelope. We've talked about on and off street parking, those requirements. City of Yes has some very strange stipulations for EV vehicles, EV capable and EV appropriate parking capacities, electric mobility, and then like loading and unloading zones that would accompany a change to a commercial district. So those are all things that are neighborhood character, but aren't necessarily building envelope.
Okay. Teresa, do you think your committee might want to take up some of the environmental provisions?
My committee isn't even making quorum usually. We have so
Okay.
many people not attending. There's really just 3 of us on that committee, four really sometimes. So it's hard for us to even make quorum unless we have some non-attending members removed. We could try, but I don't see it happening with the quorum issue.
Okay, Fred, what do you think about us taking up the environmental and commercial amendments at our next couple of meetings, or do you want this to be handled by other committees?
What I would look for is if there's, I guess what we're looking for from the subcommittee is a specific recommendation. So in other words, if there are 3 or 4 things that you think should be something that are looked at, it's fine to bring it up to the ULURP. It might be a recommendation ULURP can make to exec, or we can look at it through the exec and we can have a conversation. I typically don't want to necessarily say, I'm not going to say I'm going to force the chair to say that that's on their agenda, depending on what they already have scheduled and their capacity and everything else.
Okay.
But if you identify what the specific questions are that you have that you would like to see explored, we can see if you environmental protection or whatever other relevant committee will take it up.
Okay, so Andrew, what specifically did you want to raise about the EV charging requirements?
There were 2. I think this was about the green kind of pillar of the City of Yes plan, is that the minimum off-street parking requirements that would be provided by private development for housing and residential, they go down, but they go down even further if there's a possible overlay of like you're meeting, I think it's like 5% EVSE capable, like a charger is supplied and capable. And then the other thing is moving out of a loading berth to a loading street zone is another component of the plan to make more, I guess, engaged streetscapes. But like we have, as we pointed out, we have commercial areas mapped in our neighborhoods that are on the small side streets. So that would be kind of a logistical thing to consider. Even if
Right,
it's not part of that.
we have one manufacturing district. I think it's partly in our district, partly in, actually, I'm
No,
not
but
even sure if it's in
a
our district.
supermarket with a loading truck. Like
14.
instead of using a back alley or instead of using the side street, would be able to just kind of double park, make noise all day long. Like there are feasible and foreseeable circumstances, especially if development increases, to include greater concentrations of commercial uses and mixed. I forget, was City of Yes was one stipulation to include what was it, soft industrial or light manufacturing, things that would be considered like industrious uses.
Yes, like bakeries.
Yes.
Yes.
So then that would also fall into this loading and unloading conundrum.
Yeah, it's interesting that I did actually ask the question during the meeting. I said, is this, have you looked at what the impact of this would be? Have you checked with other agencies that regulate industry, for health and safety, fire code, et cetera? And, could any of this be accomplished by variance if it's really all so innocuous? And the answer was, yes, they could get it done by variance today by, asking for a use variance, but it's too expensive for them to hire lawyers. So we're just going to let them do it as of right. And I don't think they ever answered the question about whether other agencies had looked at it. They were just like, oh, we have these environmental laws in place. So we can just rely on those laws. We don't need to do anything zoning wise. That's what they said.
Yeah.
What was critical about City of Yes is that actually they, I think they actually explicitly talk about the relaxation or changing some of those requirements as well. So I think it's something that's it's in the scope that we need to be paying attention to.
So that maybe that, so should we ask the question then as, how do you want to ask it? Like, why would you be relaxing these requirements, or that we have a concern that there might be more heavy, that industrial activity might start to interfere with our residential areas because it's mixed use? How do you want to put it?
So we've said this is, a sea of unknowns. I think first
Right.
is what is it? Second is the scope, how far it goes, and then the third is like what levers of power do we as community members or people on CB have? Like,
Yeah,
what
I'm
are
not
the
sure.
safeguards?
It wasn't clear to me whether these provisions extended from manufacturing zones to the mixed use commercial zones. So maybe that's one question to ask. And also just highlight the fact that our commercial corridors tend to be mixed use. People live there. There's Alicia, what?
One of the questions that I would like for you to ask is exactly what incentives are they going to be doing under the ZQA that will allow developers to participate in that particular program more than they have currently?
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, so it sounds like we have our list of questions. Jay, anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add information to a point that was made to the committee on the transit zone issue. I'm looking at the New York City zoning code, and in the definitions of transit zone, it says these are generally, these are generally areas of the city beyond the Manhattan core within a half mile of a subway station where auto ownership rates are among the lowest in the city. So they're using and this is New York City zoning code transit. So my question is, if we're going to ask questions, how many transit zones are what are the transit zones that are more than 1/2 mile from a subway station in the city? Because Community Board 9 is all of a transit zone, and areas that that are a transit zone are basically they don't have to put cars, and it's more units. And just to be specific as an example, so the committee could understand it, there's going to be 764 units built at 681 Clarkson. That's Albany and Clarkson. 764 units. Okay, how many parking spaces? 0. Okay, good luck to the people who live in East Flatbush. And what I'm quoting from, just to tell you, it's the EIS. New York City, it's the environmental impact statement that just came out, and I don't want to go off topic, and it's on the website. The Community Board 9 put it up there where you can see the draft EIS, which basically means there's a problem. Okay, it's not just a regular sort of disclosure, it's an EIS saying that there's an impact, so they have to do the environmental impact statement. But I have 764 units on at the corner of Albany and Clarkson. Okay, and there's not going to be any parking because it's a transit zone. When you do a Google map search, it's more than 0.5. Okay, which means that somebody was smart enough to say, oh, let's expand the transit zone so we could build more, even though people are going to walk more than 0.5. So I'm curious as to, if you're going to ask a question, I would humbly say, how many neighborhoods are more than 0.5 away? Because then you don't have the justification. And when I say this to the committee of the 764 units, I'm not counting the supportive housing, which is mostly going to be homeless shelters. Okay, I'm not counting the units of supportive housing at 681, which is an addition, and I'm not counting the 2 homeless shelters. So I'm just counting basically the low-income units, which are 40% AMI to 80% AMI, and it's 764. So it's just.
So maybe we should just ask the question: why aren't areas of CB9 that are more than a half mile from a subway station, why don't they have an exemption from the transit zone?
I'd like to see what are the areas. I'd like to see the Department of City Planning do a little bit of work. I'd like to see what are the areas that are in the transit zone in New York City that are more than 0.5 miles.
Okay.
Because if I get that answer, and if it's only certain neighborhoods which are African American, then I have a disparate impact argument in saying that it's mostly minority neighborhoods. And when I looked at the map, I look at these at Community Board 17, and you look at the neighborhoods, and I think there's a heavy argument there. And what happens is, if people remember from 2015, there were a whole bunch of transit zones, and all of the wealthier neighborhoods said, "Oh, we don't want this. We want to reduce it. We want to reduce it."
By the way, the reason
That's correct.
that downtown Manhattan is not in the transit zone is apparently they already have rules waiving parking even before ZQA, they had rules waiving parking requirements in the Manhattan core for affordable housing. So that's why they're not in it. But also with respect to that, city planning recently, like just this last year, I think, put out a report on kind of emerging trends, one of which is remote work from home, identifying neighborhoods that have relatively high percentages of people who work from home. So there are trends that are changing. The other thing that I would like to ask them, which is something that has been noted for a long time, that the majority of jobs in the city are actually outside of Manhattan. So I would like to see them look into what percentage of people in each district, like especially who live in the outer boroughs, work in another outer borough, who don't commute to the Manhattan core. Because I think potentially commuting patterns are quite different. I have neighbors who work in Staten Island, or who work in Bushwick, or who work in Queens, because the city has moved city offices to Long Island City. So, or who work at JFK Airport. So, a lot of people don't have jobs where they commute to the Manhattan core. And is this kind of like way of thinking about things really serving us well? So that's something I would like them to start asking about too.
Okay, and Suki, if I can indulge one last question, I'll be very brief.
Yep.
I apologize for taking too much time. Unella had brought up something before that was very important. That's right around in the spot where I have an interest in. It was the Rutland Road. I think it was the 770 Rutland Road project.
Okay.
And this was the First Baptist where they were doing something. There's two aspects to it. Okay. There's the ULURP where they have to come here, so everybody could feel safe that, okay, before they upzone to 12 stories, they have to come here and do that. So people maybe could feel safe on that. But there's another aspect of it, and I think I may have asked you about this before, Suki, and you actually saw the issue and framed it perfectly, is that there is actually a DCAS issue where they are changing the deed, and you're the one, you framed it nicely, is where the deed issue on taking out the restriction on allowing it to be residential can allow them to build a building already. So the way that it works with the DCAS is they send a letter to the community board and they say, okay, does anybody have any comments on it? And if there's no comments, then they could change it from the restriction on just being, I think, like either like a religious purpose or a manufacturing, and then opening it up to the residential. So DCAS has a letter to this community board. I looked at DCAS, and DCAS is a file that says that they sent a letter to community board 9. And at any time now, DCAS can change it and remove the restriction. They came here, they gave a presentation. Everybody in the community said, hey, listen, we don't want it. We have a parking issue. We've got all these things going on Clarkson. We've got an oversaturation of social services, a homeless issue project. I would ask that the ULURP committee, I think it was the May meeting of 2022, where there were a lot of people who came, and I think even Suki, you mentioned we have some concerns about it, that there be a letter sent to DCAS saying that things have happened since you sent us a letter in 2017. And before you change it to residential so that you could build whatever it is, maybe 8 stories right away, that we have some serious concerns, and we have a tremendous amount of development going on. There's 2 developments at Kingsborough. Kingsborough Jewish has 2 independent ones that are around 600 units. And then you've got this one that's 1,000 units on Albany and Clarkson. And there's no parking. There's no parking, and everybody there, half the people drive. So DCAS, there's a time bomb that's waiting to go off, in which where Nella mentioned all these people think they went to the different the mayor and everybody else who said, oh, we're going to pass this and everything like that. Okay. DCAS there has to be a response because there's a whole set of different rules
Yeah,
with
so something we need to raise.
that there's,
we will-
we're not in favor, that things have changed, okay, etc.
Just to
So
note,
we need to
Jesse
raise
Hamilton
an-
is the new appointee to the DCAS, so Jesse Hamilton is now in charge of that department.
Who?
Was appointed Jesse Hamilton. Yeah. So
Oh.
just so folks know.
Oh,
So
great.
somebody
Oh,
local.
he's
Is
in
I thought
charge
he
of
was
it?
legal
I thought he
counsel.
was just legal counsel.
That's what I heard.
Oh, it could be. It could be. I thought he
Well,
was in charge of the whole thing. But either way, this could be a question for him.
Well, we can
Buddy of Adams.
certainly write to him.
Yes, just one point, Suki, and thank you for mentioning that, Jay. The fact of the matter is that we, as I said, we had the meeting, and the impression is it's just a formality that everything is hunky-dory. That's the impression that we got.
Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, and Mia, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have not received any documents to say that they have filed with ULURP for a ULURP change. We have not received anything from DCAS to say that they've lifted the deed restriction. But this is something we should take up at the next ULURP meeting.
And also what they're bringing into the neighborhood, we have two babysitting just across the street from there, and they're intended to bring in a whole different childcare program for these mama and papa that's in the area. So it's a lot of displacement that with the people who have lived there in their residence for years, and they're coming now, and they're not coming there. As I said, they made mention it's going to be 12 stories, and that's why they're looking for the zoning to be 12 stories. Our building is 6. Kingsbrook Jewish is under HCR, as we are under HCR, was making the same height requirement as our building so that it wouldn't be overshadowed. So it's a lot that has changed since, the city of Yes.
So I just want to emphasize again, and you're right that a lot has changed. And one of the things that's changed is the population projections. Again, if you look at and the amount that has been built, right? If you look at the number of units that exists in Brooklyn today, and you look at the city's housing projections from their own plans, how many units they want to see in Brooklyn by 2040, the number that needs to be built between now and 2040 is about 25,000 units. We have 18 community districts, of which we are one. I mean, I don't know what people think is a fair way to distribute this density, because everybody seems to have their reasons for why they don't want it in their district. But if you kind of assume an equal distribution, that's not very much. We may already have built that number of units since 2020.
We have, and we have
equal.
vacant.
Right
We have but we have so many vacant units just sitting around. Has anybody taken that into consideration?
This is not, I don't know if this is something official, but I'm just curious to know, if certain things have to be distributed, whether it's density, whether it's, homeless housing, the things that every neighborhood seems to have an argument about, right? What do people think is a fair way of doing things? Should some districts be required to build a lot more than other districts? Should a handful of districts build all of the housing? Should a handful of districts build all of the affordable housing? Should it be equal? Should there be some, because I feel like whatever kind of reasons they come up with for who should build, whether it's, the lower density areas should build because they have more room, or the higher density areas should build because they have more infrastructure, or, poor neighborhoods should build because the land is cheaper, or rich neighborhoods should build because they have higher opportunity. There's always an argument on either side. So at the end of the day, what do people think is a fair way of doing this? I'm just curious.
Well, Suki, I'm just gonna say for this 12-story building, there are
Yeah.
only gonna be 30 affordable units.
That's not a lot. So, like, do people think that it's fair for some districts to build much more than others? I'm just sort of curious.
I mean, historically, the way that it's panned out, at least in the last 20 or 30 years, is the neighborhoods that are primarily white homeowners, they have the most political power. They don't get anything built in their neighborhood because of that. And so what ends up happening is if you wanted to be really equitable about it, that's where you would start. You wouldn't start with neighborhoods like ours. You would have to start in neighborhoods where there has been no building whatsoever, and they've been able to politically make that happen. They're the ones that haven't done their quote unquote fair share, whether we're talking about homeless shelters, whether we're talking about new affordable development, any of that. There's a significant disparity that would need to be sort of tackled before you start talking about how are we going to divvy up, whatever we're going to do from now on. Like you kind of have to go back and fix some of the disparity that's already occurred. So I mean, yeah. So it's a tricky question, and I don't think it's as nearly as simple as they want to make it seem. Especially, they'll say something like the Soho NoHo rezoning was the way to even out things, and same thing with Kiwanis, but like it really wasn't. Like they were still ultimately displacing immigrant families. They were still displacing families of color. So it's a really hard thing to overcome. I mean, it's the way real estate is set up to function. So we're working against some really entrenched forces that have been dominating our city for centuries. So it's tricky.
So anybody else want to comment? Unella?
I agree with what Esteban said, and yes, the neighborhoods of color get and are oversaturated with and inundated with the supportive housing and the low income housing. And as Jay pointed out, also right across we have the development that is right across at Kingsbrook Jewish, across where they have the parking lot is going to be another supermarket with another 7 or 8 stories high. And just on the block at Kingsborough Psychiatric, that's going to be something else. And now the church has decided that, the 6 stories was not enough to build. So now they're going to double it to 12 stories. And, the majority of people on that side of the district, maybe I've cried wolf too many times. Nobody pays any attention. Now we get all this attention that is unwarranted. So, that's all I have to say.
Fred, what do you think?
There's I'm getting old and I'm hungry and tired and cynical. This is all about figuring out a way that developers can build where they want to build. They want places that are in transit-rich features, so that way investment bankers who are willing to pay a lot of money can get into downtown Manhattan or midtown Manhattan very quickly. Or you're going to build in locations right next to Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, so you can sell the penthouse for millions of dollars, and they can look out over the greenery of Brooklyn. They don't want to go to certain places, and certain places don't want them. That's not what this is all about. This is about making it easier for them to get where they want to get. And unfortunately, city housing policy has become a matter of, I guess, it's cynical as well, where it's like, you know what, they've given up in the sense of trying to find a way to build this stuff. So let's get crumbs wherever we can get crumbs. Help them get what they want, and hopefully we can get crumbs on the side of that. And everybody looks good, and you can put it as a political star next to your name.
Everybody except the people who live there.
Since when do you matter?
Nicola, what are your thoughts? Nicola, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just asking, Nella read off of, so much development that's going on, but it's state-owned land. Will that count towards our development and number of units that City of Yes may be projecting and asking for? Because are they considering that, or is that because it's state-owned land, it's not even going to be showing up on their statistics?
Okay, so I think, you know, City of Yes it's one of those cases where there seem to be different things going on from the same department, right? City of Yes is one thing. The second thing, the thing that I'm talking about is the Plan YC 2010 to 2040, which is something that dates to the Bloomberg administration, but it was recently updated with new census numbers, right? And then the housing numbers I'm getting from HPD's Housing and Vacancy Survey, although they're not prescriptive about how much housing needs to be built. So there's a bit of a, you know, you know, whether it counts, whether it doesn't count, this is really all, I guess, political. But in terms of what the Plan YC, in terms of what they're putting out, that is supposedly what their demographers believe is sufficient to house a projected population increase up to 2040. And in case you're wondering what's happening after 2040, the Congressional Budget Office is projecting population decline for the country as a whole out to 2050. Just, you know, that's what happens to developed countries, declining birth rate.
Boomers.
Yeah.
The boomers. They'll be dying
The
off.
building's already built and the money's already made, so.
Yeah, but that's my concern, is that I don't think that the state-owned land and the development happening there is on the radar. So we're getting double hit. And no one is paying attention to the impact on our transit, the impact on our density, because it's state-owned land and it's not showing up anywhere on the city side.
Correct.
Okay, it's past 9:30. I think we need to adjourn. Teresa, did you have something you wanted to say? Or you just, I think she's just adjusting something on her monitor.
No,
Okay.
I'd like to
Oh.
go. I'm burnt out
Okay.
from this.
All right. So I will put together that, Unella, did you want to still say something? No? Okay. So I'll put together that list of further questions and concerns. I will also send around some of these documents to Mia and ask her to send them out to people. You should all email Mia with your contact information. I don't have everybody's contact information. And then it sounds like there are issues that you want to raise, that people want to raise at the next ULURP meeting about 77 Rutland and Kingsborough West.
Question, could we have a folder, or I don't know, I know we have a new website that may operate a little differently, but some kind of repository for these documents and these links, so that anyone, if they're interested in City of Yes and wanted to get some background, these are some of the documents that we have or that we've been looking at, because emails will get lost.
Mia, is that possible?
Yes, I hear you. I'll talk with Dante in the morning and figure something out and get back to you guys.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Oh, okay. And so for next meeting, do we want to talk about the environmental components, the commercial components a little bit more? Well, I guess we raised some of the issues already, but maybe we need to talk about the environmental components more and the blast issues.
Yes, definitely. Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. All right. So good night, everybody. And thank you so much for
Good night.
attending. And
Yes.
thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mayor
Good night.
and Fred, for hosting this.
Right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you,
night.
Mia.
You know.
Bye.